Hi everyone, Max here from Evidence-Based Football Manager. In my last video, I tested 5 different parameters in the game that are related to player performance. I've received some feedbacks regarding those tests, 2 of which I wanted to address in this video today. Firstly, tactical familiarity didn't seem to have any impact on player performance, which I think caught a lot of people off guard. So I have done some additional tests regarding tactical familiarity that I wanted to share with you today. Secondly, I also showed you in my last video how the important matches attribute was associated with competition reputation, but there could be other factors in the game that also determines whether a match is considered important or not. So I have run some additional tests regarding the important matches attribute, which I will also be sharing with you today. Lastly, after I talk about tactical familiarity and important matches, I'll be making an important announcement at the end of this video, so do stick around till the end. In my last video, when I did my experiment on tactical familiarity, I used a blank tactic that didn't include any team instructions. This is because I wanted to control all the variables as much as possible in my tests. But some of you have mentioned the possibility that tactical familiarity in Football Manager is all about how well the players are able to carry out the team instructions that are attached to the team's tactic, which might explain why, in my previous tests, when I used a blank tactic, tactical familiarity didn't seem to show any impact on player performance. So this time I decided to repeat the same tests as before, except this time I'm going to use a tactic that utilizes some team instructions. For the purpose of today's tests, I decided to use the Gegenpress 4-3-3 tactic, otherwise known as the meta tactic in Football Manager. Gegenpress 4-3-3 is almost becoming a meme now within the Football Manager community because it's just been the most popular tactic that everyone uses all the time. And honestly, it's justified because that tactic just works so well regardless of what team you play as in Football Manager. The Gegenpress tactic uses a variety of tactical instructions, including pass into space, play out of defense, take short kicks, distribute to centre backs, and so on. So I reckon this tactic can demonstrate the impact of tactical familiarity if we accept the assumption that tactical familiarity is to do with players following the team instructions. As always, I use the Test Cup save file for today's tests. I made both Team A and Team B of the Test Cup save file use the Gegenpress 4-3-3 tactic. I set up 2 test scenarios. In the first save file, tactical familiarity of both Team A and Team B were maximized using the in-game editor and the real-time editor. In the second save file, tactical familiarity of Team A was minimized, while tactical familiarity of Team B remained unchanged. Now, I do believe that there is a glitch in this game. For some reason, when I use the editor to maximize tactical familiarity will not actually go up to 100%. For example, here you're looking at Team A of the Test Cup save file, and after I click this option here to maximize the team's tactical familiarity, you can see that the tactical familiarity of these individual players are kind of all over the place. And if I go into the tactics page, so here you can see that again, tactical familiarity is kind of all over the place. This is something that didn't happen in the previous video when I used the blank tactic in my previous tests. For example, if I try switching to the blank tactic right now for this team, you can see that tactical familiarity has been maximized to 100% for this tactic. But yeah, with the Gegenpress 4-3-3 tactic, I couldn't bring tactical familiarity of both Team A and Team B up to 100% despite using the editor. There was one more thing that I found was a bit strange. When I maximized tactical familiarity of both Team A and Team B, the resulting level of tactical familiarity was slightly different for the 2 teams. You can see this is the tactical familiarity of Team A after it's been maximized. And when I try switching to Team B, this is the tactical familiarity of Team B after it's been maximized. You'll be able to see that tactical familiarity of Team A and B are pretty similar, but not perfectly identical. Tactical familiarity of Team A and B would maximize to 2 different levels, despite the players from the 2 teams being exact clones of each other. These glitches don't mean that I can't proceed with the tests. The Test Cup trials can still be done. We just need to keep in mind a few things when we are interpreting the results. So first of all, tactical familiarity of Team A and Team B were not maximized to the highest possible level. And secondly, when I maximize the tactical familiarity of Team A and Team B, the level of tactical familiarity of those two teams were not perfectly identical. Anyway, let's take a look at the results. I have a bar graph here that shows you the outcomes of the Test Cup trials. This first bar here is when I tried to maximize the tactical familiarity of both Team A and Team B, although like I said, tactical familiarity didn't actually go up to 100%. So here, Team A won 42.3% of the time, and Team B won 38.3% of the time. So Team A here has won about 4% more than Team B, which I think is due to the fact that the level of tactical familiarity of Team A and B were not completely identical, which is also something that I've mentioned earlier. It's likely that, so what's probably happened is that tactical familiarity of Team A was set to a slightly higher level compared to Team B, which has resulted in a slightly superior performance of Team A compared to Team B during these trials. This second bar here is when tactical familiarity of Team A was minimized to 1%, whereas tactical familiarity of Team B remained unchanged. So here, Team A won 41.2% of the time, and Team B won 38.6% of the time. So the number of wins for Team A went down ever so slightly compared to the first scenario, which I don't think is statistically significant. I think it's fair to say that the results of these Test Cup trials were unaffected by the changes in Team A's tactical familiarity. This is despite both Team A and Team B using the Gegenpress 4-3-3 tactic, which uses a range of team instructions. Since the Test Cup trials didn't demonstrate any useful impact of tactical familiarity, I switched to a real-life save file using the Community Shield match, just like I did in the previous video. I made both teams of the Community Shield match, Arsenal and Man City, use the Gegenpress 4-3-3 tactic. I set up two test scenarios. The first scenario is when I maximize the tactical familiarity of both Arsenal and Man City, and the second scenario is when I minimize the tactical familiarity of Arsenal while the tactical familiarity of Man City remained unchanged. The same glitch was observed again with Arsenal and Man City, so I could not fully maximize the tactical familiarity of the two teams to 100%, despite using the in-game editor and the real-time editor. Again, this doesn't stop me from running the Community Shield trials. I just need to keep in mind that in the first test scenario, Arsenal and Man City's tactical familiarity were pretty high, but not quite 100%. And let's take a look at the results. Again, I have a bar graph here for the two test scenarios using Arsenal and Man City. In the first scenario, when I maximize the tactical familiarity of both Arsenal and Man City, Arsenal has won 28.8% and Man City has won 44.8% of the time. So Man City here did win a lot more than Arsenal. Now let's take a look at the second scenario. This is when I minimize the tactical familiarity of Arsenal while I didn't change anything for Man City. Arsenal here has won 25.2% and Man City has won 49.7%. So Arsenal's win rate here did go down by around 3.6% and Man City's win rate did go up by around 5%, which I don't think is coincidental. In the second test scenario, Arsenal's tactical familiarity was lowered, and that did lead to a slightly lower win rate for Arsenal and a slightly higher win rate for Man City. So tactical familiarity does seem to have had an impact on these Community Shield trials, although I have to say the magnitude of that impact isn't as big as one would have thought. So in summary, when I used the Test Cup save file using the Gegenpress 4-3-3 tactic, tactical familiarity did not affect the outcome of the Test Cup trials. On the other hand, when I used the Community Shield setup to test the impact of tactical familiarity, again using the Gegenpress 4-3-3 tactic, tactical familiarity did affect the outcome of the Community Shield trials, although the magnitude of that impact wasn't as big as I thought. So after all that, what is my final verdict on the tactical familiarity mechanic in FM24? I don't know, I still think the evidence isn't strong enough for me to declare confidently that tactical familiarity works as intended in FM24. I'm not saying that the mechanic is broken in the game. All I'm saying is that based on the tests that I've done in this video and in the last video, there was very limited evidence that tactical familiarity is working as intended in FM24. If you guys have any bright ideas as to why tactical familiarity didn't seem to influence team performance in my tests, let me know in the comment section below. As always, I am making my save files that I used in this video publicly available on my Dropbox folder. So feel free to take a look at the save files yourself. And yeah, if you have any bright ideas, do let me know. Okay, now let's talk about the important matches attribute. In my last video, I showed you how competition reputation affects the efficacy of the important matches attribute of players in FM24. While players with high important matches will always outperform players with low important matches, the magnitude of that improvement in player performance will be greater in matches with a higher reputation, whereas the magnitude of improvement will be smaller in matches with a lower reputation. That was what I found in my previous video, but I did read some comments saying that there could be factors in the game other than competition reputation that can also affect the efficacy of the important matches attribute, which prompt me to conduct some additional tests regarding important matches. I could think of two other factors in the game that could potentially turn a match in the game into an important match: rivalry between the two teams, and also what stage the match is in a cup tournament. So those two factors were put to the test. I used the following 6 environments to perform these tests: a Premier League match, a Champions League Final, Champions League Semifinal, Champions League Quarterfinal, FA Cup Final, and lastly the Carabao Cup Final. I set up these save files so that Manchester United and Manchester City competed against each other in these matches. The 6 different match environments were further divided into 4 scenarios. Half the time, Manchester United and Man City were set as mutual rivals, and the other half the time, I used the editor to remove the rivalry between Man U and Man City. Half the time, the important matches attribute of Man U and Man City players were all set to 10 out of 20, and the other half the time, the important matches attribute of Man U and Man City players were set to 20 out of 20 and 1 out of 20 respectively. For each of these scenarios, I conducted 1,000 independent trials between Man U and Man City, and I recorded the outcomes of those trials. The reputation of all competitions used in these tests was equalized to 200 out of 200. This is because I've already proven in my last video that competition reputation is a factor that can affect the efficacy of the important matches attribute, so I didn't want competition reputation acting as a variable in today's tests. Also, I want to point out that for the 6 different match environments that I used, there were some variables that I couldn't control due to the fact that these matches are all held at different times of the season, and also because all these competitions have slightly different rules. For example, the Premier League match uses 5 substitutes out of 9, the Champions League Final uses 5 substitutes out of 12, and also the Champions League Final goes to extra time if scores are level after 90 minutes, which doesn't happen in a Premier League match. So do keep in mind that the testing conditions were slightly different for the 6 different match environments that I used in today's tests. And let's take a look at the results. I have a table here that shows you the number of wins and draws for Man U and Man City from all these various test scenarios. For example, let's take a look at the results from the Premier League match. When Man U and Man City were not set as mutual rivals, and important matches of both teams was set to 10 out of 20, Man U won 34.6% of the time, and Man City won 40.2% of the time. When important matches of both teams was set to 2 extreme values, Man U won 39.7% of the time, whereas Man City won 35.3% of the time. On the other hand, when Man U and Man City were set as mutual rivals, and the important matches attribute of both teams was set to 10 out of 20, Man U won 37% of the time, whereas Man City won 38.8% of the time. And lastly, when important matches were set to two extreme values, either 20 out of 20 or 1 out of 20, Man U won 45.8% of the time, whereas Man City won 30.1% of the time. Now, these win rates of Man U and Man City by themselves don't tell us any useful information. Yes, the win rate of Manchester United went up when their players had higher important matches attribute, but that always happens regardless of the importance of a match, which is what I've discovered in the last video. What's important for the purpose of today's tests is to compare the amount of change in the match outcomes across the different test scenarios. That's how we can find out the factors in the game that can turn a match into an important match. Let's take a look at these values. For example, when Man U and Man City were not set as rivals, as I changed the important matches attribute of Man U and Man City players, Man U's win rate went up by 5.1%, while Man City's win rate dropped by 4.9%. On the other hand, when Man U and Man City were set as mutual rivals, as I changed the important matches attribute of Man U and Man City, the win rate of Man U went up by 8.8%, while the win rate of Man City dropped by 8.7%. There is a statistically significant difference between these two values, which means that whether the two teams are set as rivals or not did affect the efficacy of the important matches attribute, which in turn seems to suggest that rivalry is a factor in the game that can turn a match into an important match. Interestingly though, rivalry did not always increase the efficacy of important matches in other match environments. For example, if you take a look at the results from the Champions League Final, whether there's a rivalry between Man U and Man City did not affect the efficacy of the important matches attribute. If you take a look at the FA Cup Final, so here the results are even more interesting. Setting Man U and Man City as mutual rivals decreased the efficacy of the important matches attribute, which seems to suggest that the important matches attribute is less impactful when rivalry exists between two teams in a match, which I have to say is rather odd. So yeah, considering that these 6 different match environments all produced conflicting results regarding the relationship between rivalry and important matches, I cannot draw the conclusion that rivalry is a factor that can turn a match into an important match in FM24. Alright, next we're going to investigate whether the different stages of cup tournaments can affect the efficacy of the important matches attribute. This time I'm going to compare the 6 different match environments when Man U and Man City were not set as mutual rivals. Out of the 6 different types of match environments, the FA Cup Final was affected by the greatest amount by the important matches attribute. If you take a look here, when Man U and Man City both had 10 out of 20 important matches, Man U won 33.7% of the time, whereas when Man U and Man City had 2 extreme important matches values, Man U's win rate shot up to 49.1%, which is an increment of 15.4%. In the Champions League Final and in the Carabao Cup Final, the match outcomes were affected by the important matches attribute a little bit less compared to the FA Cup Final. For example, if you take a look at the results from the Champions League Final, when I set the important matches attribute of players to 2 extreme values, Man U's win rate went up by 11.3%, whereas in the Carabao Cup Final, setting important matches of players to 2 extreme values resulted in Man U's win rate going up by 11.8%. In the Champions League Quarterfinals, the match results were affected the least amount by the important matches attribute out of the 6 different match environments that I used. Here, when both Man U and Man City had 10 out of 20 important matches, Man U won 41% of the time, whereas when the two teams had 2 extreme important matches values, Man U's win rate went up to 43.2%, which is an increment of just 2.2%. So here in the Champions League quarterfinals, important matches played a very limited role in influencing the outcome of the match. So based on these observations, the following theory is possible. Finals in cup tournaments are considered as being important, and the lower stages of the tournament are considered gradually less important. In the Champions League, for example, the final is considered as being the most important, semi-finals are considered slightly less important, and quarterfinals are considered even less important. This theory, if true, would explain why important matches affected the match results by the most amount in the Champions League final, but it didn't affect the match results as much in the quarterfinals and in the semi-finals. Now, I can't confirm whether this theory holds for every single cup tournaments in the game and for every single stage of cup tournaments in the game, because it will just take way too much time for me to test all those individual scenarios. But yeah, based on the tests that I've done, it does appear that finals of cup tournaments are considered as being more important compared to the lower stages of the tournament, meaning that important matches will be more impactful in cup finals compared to the lower stages of the same tournament. Actually, there is a way in the game which kind of allows you to guess whether an upcoming match is considered as being important or not. In FM24, if you go into the tactics page, you can ask your assistant manager to make a team selection, and sometimes the assistant manager will recommend you a player with phrases like, this player thrives in big matches, which could be an indication that the upcoming match is considered by the game engine as being an important match. On the other hand, in some matches, the assistant manager will ask you to play your second team players by saying things like, this sort of fixture is a good fit for our backup players, which I guess is an indication that the upcoming match is not considered by the game engine as being an important match. Actually, I don't think these advices given by the assistant manager are completely reliable. In the Carabao Cup Final, for example, the assistant manager will advise you to play your second team players, which indicates that the assistant manager doesn't consider the Carabao Cup Final as being an important match. But according to the tests that I've shown you, important matches can affect the outcome of the Carabao Cup Final match by a significant amount. On the other hand, in the Champions League quarterfinal, the assistant manager will advise you to pick players with high important matches attribute. But as I showed you earlier, important matches didn't really affect the outcome of the Champions League quarterfinal by all that much. So yeah, although the assistant manager will sometimes give you hints in the game about the importance of an upcoming match, I really can't say whether those advices are accurate or not. In summary, I could not confirm whether rivalry between two teams can turn a match into an important match in FM24. There is some indication that cup finals are considered as being important in FM24, although I can't say whether that's true for every single tournament in the game. So that means, so far, the only factor in the game that I can say for sure affects the important matches attribute in FM24 is competition reputation, which is something that I've found in the last video. In competitions with a higher reputation, players with high important matches attribute will thrive more, whereas in competitions with a lower reputation, important matches attribute of players will not be as relevant for player performance and the outcome of the match. Alright people, announcement time. This is going to be my last Football Manager experiment that I'll be uploading on this channel, and that is because I am actually retiring from the YouTube scene. I'm sorry if it sounds so abrupt, but it is something that I've been thinking about for a while. I will be making one last video to do like a proper farewell. In that video, I will be explaining my reasons for retirement, and I'll also be making a summary of my experiences running this channel for the past 3 years. I'll be taking questions, so if you have anything you want to ask me, let me know in the comment section, and I will do my best to try to answer them in my next video. Nothing's off limits. You can ask me whatever you want. This is going to be your last chance. So, of course, if it's something that might be flagged by YouTube, then obviously I won't be able to talk about them. But yeah, as long as it's something that YouTube will allow, I will do my best to answer your questions. So yeah, fire away in the comment section. All right, guys. I guess that's it for today. Take care, and yeah, I'll see you all next time.